I feel like you're going to lose. And I feel like if you don't jump on this AI bandwagon, you will lose.
Hello, friends. My name is Pye. Welcome to SR Lounge. I am joined today by my good friend Lee Morris of Fstoppers.
We're in Vegas. We're having a good time, but Pye is making me work today. We're filming a couple videos. What's this one going to be about?
I'm kind of Debbie Downer on this trip, but we are talking about just kind of AI. Like, how has AI sort of changed things in the photo space? What do we think? Like, it's been like, what, a year and a half since it's kind of like hit the scene and really gotten big. So there's a lot to talk about, like what we've seen, where we think it's going, and just kind of general updates.
First of all, I would like to point out that I think the majority of people, even very technical photographers, do not really know what is currently possible.
For sure. For sure.
Because even I, and I'm kind of up on it because I've made some videos about it and stuff before, I've learned so much from my business partner, Patrick, recently because he's been working on some more detailed videos.
Yeah.
And I had no clue what you were able to do these. I thought you could go into, like, you know, these Discord channels and type in, you know, picture of girl on beach and it would create something, and 99% of the time it'd look horrible, but 1% of the time it would look photoreal and you go, oh, I got one. Patrick has been showing me these things where you can upload your own photo,
yeah,
and then make it better instantly. I don't know if it's instant, but like automatically by just telling it some things that you want changed, or to like reimagine this image. And a lot of times the computer will just make it better, but it will be the same person in the photo. And I'm blown away by this stuff. This stuff kind of freaked me out a year and a half ago when it started coming out. And then Patrick's showing me what we're capable of doing now. And I'm like, Patrick, you got to get this video out. You know so much about how this works. And then Patrick's like, dude, I don't know anything about this. Because the farther you dig into what's possible, it opens up more and more doors. And so we are like right on the cusp of photorealistic results every single time that are better than anything a photographer can create on their own. And that's pretty creepy, in my opinion.
It's really crazy. What software are you guys typically playing on? Like Midjourney? Is that the...
So Midjourney was the only one that I've personally ever played with. And, you know, it's still incredible. And it's probably 10 times better than it was when I played with it 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I think Patrick currently is using Stable Diffusion, which
another one that's very popular.
I've never used before. Maybe I've played with Dolly a little bit. I think the things that Patrick's been able to do, for instance, with Midjourney, you never really had control over like the person that was showing up in the images.
Mm-hmm.
You could never put like a celebrity in the images because they have rules, because they don't want to create, you know, photorealistic images of celebrities doing questionable things. But as far as I know, with some of these other ones, you can do that. You can create porn with any person you can imagine with this software. And there's subreddits dedicated to this.
That's wild.
And so Patrick was creating photographs of celebrities taken with the lighting of Martin Scholler, like the dual strip boxes by the lens.
Yeah.
And then he was sending me all these photos on iMessage. And he was like, tell me which ones of these are fake and which ones are real. Every single one of them looks perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm going through and I'm like, all right, I think these 5 are fake and these 5 are real. And he responds back, they're all fake.
Wow.
And the only thing I was in the past, just 6 months ago, to figure out if something was real or fake, you could kind of look at the details. You could look at the eyes and something be off. You could definitely look at hands and fingers and something would be off. Now it's almost the opposite. It's like I was looking for things that were too perfect, and I'm like, that's got to be fake, you know. But photographers have been using Photoshop for a decade now to make people look plastic and perfect and stuff. So it has literally gotten to the point where I cannot tell what's real and what's fake. And the other thing was, some of the people he was creating with this Martin Scholler look were just made up characters by the computer, and others were celebrities.
Oh, interesting.
So every time he sent me a photo of a celebrity, I was like, well, that's obviously real because you can't make celebrity fake images using this software. And he was like, yes, you can. Every single one of them was fake.
Yeah, there's a ton of scary implications to kind of, but this isn't like, this isn't new territory, because we talked about this. We came on to Fstoppers actually talking about this a year or so ago. I think it might have been a year and a half ago. The speed of which these softwares are evolving is just insane. Like a year and a half ago, you were getting like painting. It was like abstract painting kind of results out of these applications. And within 6 months, it started to become, okay, there's like photorealism now. And then within another 6 months, it was, okay, now you can literally mimic any type of style, any type of lighting effect, any painter, any artist. And it creates a lot. I'll be honest, it's been depressing from a creative standpoint for me for probably like a little bit over, I'd say over the last 2 years, because when something becomes so simple and you remove every bit of the effort that it takes to, not every, but like 99% of the effort it takes to get there, then that thing intrinsically kind of loses value to me. Like the idea of creating this work. So I've since been kind of getting my motivation and my creativity back, but it's kind of transformed a bit. Like personally, where I gravitate towards is like experiential creativity. Like if I'm going to take photographs, I want those photographs to mean something. I want there to be an experience, a memory tied to those things, because that's what gives it, to me, that's what gives it meaning now. But otherwise, I would agree that the stuff that you can do now, and right now, it's not even that easy to do, because right now, if you're talking about from like a broad consumer level, you do have to download Discord, you have to get into these, subscriptions, you have to go into specific channels, you have to learn how to do prompts. But in a couple of years, it's just going to be an app. Like all of these things are just going to be apps, and you're just like punch buttons and get all the results that you want. It's going to be totally consumer friendly.
Yeah.
And in that space, when everybody knows about it, it really transforms like the value of an image. And we can't even call these photographs anymore. Like what we don't even have a term. What is it? An AI photograph?
It's AI art.
Because AI, like you've seen the competitions now, there's plenty of competitions that have been won by an AI photograph submission.
Yeah.
And then everybody gets in uproar because it's not a photograph, right? It's an AI submission. And I think most cases they lie about they're just trying to get it entered to see if they can win. But it's happened so many times now. So what?
Because it's literally better. It's painful to admit it, but the results are better than what photographers can create, and it's instant and it's talentless.
Of course. And if it's not better, you can just reiterate it.
Right.
It is better.
Right. I'm not saying every result is better, but with enough time and patience, you're definitely going to get a better result,
Totally.
And the other thing is, we're doing a photography competition right now on landscape photography, and the world has become so small with the internet and plane travel. You can kind of go anywhere and take pictures of whatever you want now. And landscape photography is one of these weird genres where, for the most part, the pictures that win all the contests are of the same 50 locations around the world. They're just like super beautiful spots, but photographers go there. They stand in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
They get the exact same millimeter lens.
Behind the scenes, you have like 60 people all in one spot.
They're fighting to take the same picture that people have taken every day for the last, 50 years or whatever. That's also really lame, in my opinion, So I don't know, if you had to gauge what's more original, going to the same spot.
That's true.
That everyone goes to and like reading ahead online, like I need to shoot this at 55 millimeters.
Yeah.
I need my tripod to be at 3 feet off the ground, or going to apps and like, working for an hour and coming up some, which one is more creativity?
It's really hard to say. I would have started leaning towards the app side. I mean, there have been photographers so far that have done some pretty incredible things with AI. I've seen several photographers that have been using AI to basically generate their backgrounds and then to take a photograph and composite over the background. And you get really, really cool creative ideas. And the other kind of gnarly part about it is like a lot of us, we have these ideas for like photo sets in our head, right? Like we have these ideas, commercial photographers, and I'm not a commercial photographer, but an example, it would be like a Tim Tatter. Like you probably have tons of ideas of different types of like shoots that you want to do. And I think he's one that has been using AI to do this. But just because of like what's realistic to do, if you're going to create a set, you need to have a budget, you need to have sponsors, you need to have somebody that's actually paying for it. You need to find talent, you need to have a producer, you need to do all these different things to create that set that you want to shoot on. Well, you could just create an AI set, like an AI set that has the exact look that you want, that's something surrealistic, that's something whatever it is, and you didn't have to do any of that production work, and then you can photograph the models and drop them right into it. And so it creates a lot of unique opportunities for things that just are impractical in everyday life. But I guess I have another question for you then. Where do you feel like this is taking photography as a whole? And by the way, I would say that there's nothing creative about standing in the exact same spot, taking the same landscape as especially when there's 100 other people there that are like got their tripod legs down. And I don't feel like that's creativity. I feel like that's collecting postcards.
But I could also argue there's certainly an element of maybe patience is the right word. There's an element of luck. And then usually the guys that are winning the competitions or the Peter Licks who are winning the fine art game, they're doing an incredible amount of post-processing.
For sure. That's the other part of the artistry.
Is putting like an element of creativity into the image.
For sure.
But
speaking of which, you guys have a tutorial with Elia out right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
A new photographing Japan.
Yeah. So we went to Japan. You can check it out on fstoppers.com/store. And we did go to many places that, you know, are these like super famous places. We also went to a lot of places that were kind of off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Where there's one shot in particular, I don't even want to try to pronounce the name, but it's these rocks. And it's my favorite type of landscape photography when you're photographing an interesting place or thing,
mm-hmm.
but because of the location, there's no possible way you could capture the exact same image as somebody else.
Mm.
So,
because water's moving or like different things.
Exactly. And in many cases, you're closer to whatever the subject is. So like if you're taking a picture of a mountain from another mountain, usually there's kind of like a clearing spot in the trees where all the photographers go. And usually when this happens, whoever owns it will like build a standing platform with a gate, you know, and like everyone just goes there and fights each other for the exact same thing.
With steps. Step 1, stand here. Step 2, use this lens. Step 3, like it's literally planned out for you basically.
Yeah. But I really like the landscape photography when you're taking a picture of a unique or a well-known place, but because of the place and the way it's designed or whatever, you know, the way nature designed it, you couldn't copy somebody's image even if you tried, just because you could never find the exact foreground element that you're going to put in the shot or whatever it might be. So those are definitely my favorite things. You know, I think Elia would probably disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
He's become famous for taking photos of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah.
And I think he would argue that when he goes to a less known place and tries to do something different, it just doesn't get as much engagement online.
So interesting.
And therefore it doesn't mean as much money. You know what I mean? So there's a reason why the most beautiful places in the world are the most visited and are the most photographed and are the most liked. It's like because it's the best. That's why. So.
Well, and I wonder if the people that are buying those photographs or they want to hang them on the wall, they very likely have some sort of emotional attachment to that place, right? The reason I would imagine the reason why those photos would be doing better than other ones is because maybe there's something to be said of like if I've been to Japan and I love Japan, then buying a photograph of one of my favorite spots there would have significance to me, as opposed to like if I'd never been in a place, then it just becomes a piece of wall art that you hang in like your lawyer's office, right? Like it just becomes something to look at.
Okay, so this is taking a very different turn from AI, but I might argue the opposite in the sense that I feel like a lot of these places feel magical until you go there.
Interesting.
So when I go into a Peter Lick photo gallery, I'm just blown away by every print. Everything looks like it's glowing. They're just unbelievable locations and photography and post-processing. Everything's like top notch. But then when I see photographs that he's taken of places that I've been, and even in our hotel here, we were just looking yesterday, like, oh, look at these gigantic Peter Lick prints, like at the check-in of our hotel. And what's the arch where like the sun comes up and hits the bottom of the arch? We were just looking at it yesterday.
You've been there? Arches?
It's around that. I can't even keep them straight. Yeah. But it's freaking unbelievable. Like you look at this thing and it in print form, it's amazing. And even in real life, it's an amazing natural structure. But when you go there and you learn that every photographer goes there not to take just a photo of this arch, but to take a photo of the arch being hit by the sun from the bottom as the sun rises, and you have to be there within this 5-minute period. And all the photographers are fighting with each other and bumping elbows and everything and arguing because they all want this one shot. And then I look up and I see Peter Lick's shot, which is flawless. It's amazing. And it's, the size of a freaking bus on the wall. And I'm like, wow, that looks great. But my mind goes to all the nerds fighting to take the exact same photo, and it loses some magic for me.
I could see that. But again, there's, an emotional attachment could be positive or negative. And this is very much having to do with the AI conversation, because it's kind of my argument to the value of a photograph. But right now you have like that, for those that don't know, my background is psychology. So a lot of psychology is built into the education that I do. It's built into like what I do as a photographer, built into my love of photography. And you have a negative association, a negative attachment to that scene, that image. Like when you see that Peter Lick photograph, or when you see that famous spot, you associate it with like, just, this isn't unique. This is a bunch of people fighting to get the exact same shot. And so for that reason, it makes sense why you're saying what you're saying.
I just wonder, for example, I've met some people in Puerto Rico who are Peter Lick collectors.
Yeah.
And I need to ask them. I can literally get the answer from them when I go back home. Have you been to the places that you have hanging on your wall? I would bet the answer is no.
Probably not. And I that kind of goes against what I've been saying. I think there might be an attachment more so to like the area or the idea of it, but I would probably bet that they haven't been there. I would also bet that they're not technical people at all. They just like the look of it. I think
exactly.
They like the appearance of it. I think the colors resonate, the area. Maybe they grew up in Arizona, and this is a place in Arizona that is very famous. And I think there's some sort of emotional attachment there, but I also think there's just aesthetic.
Well, that leads us back to the AI art thing. And every time we bring this up and we tell people that, hey, we're kind of worried about this from photographers' standpoint, this is kind of like what happened to painters when photography came out, and everybody argues, but there's still painters today. And I'm like, not like there was.
Yeah.
It's not really a career choice like it used to be. But the argument that everyone makes is, there's nothing to worry about because, yes, you can create beautiful images of fake places or fake people, but there's very little value there. And there will always be a need for photographers to photograph real people and real places at real events and stuff like that.
I totally disagree with that.
I feel like that is going to be going away. Not completely. It'll never go away completely. But the argument that I made, maybe it was a year and a half ago, was let's say, for example, wedding photography. Mm-hmm. You're still a professional wedding photographer. I was a professional wedding photographer for a very long time. People pay a lot of money to have their wedding photographed. What happens when you can easily And I mean, you can already do this right now, but it's just not that easy and it's not perfectly photorealistic. But what happens when every single person has a 3D scan of their face? Every person. You do it like, because we're doing it. You buy an iPhone and your iPhone is scanning your face to do the Face ID and everything. Like, it exists. You just don't really have access to it right now. But what happens when every single person has a photorealistic 3D scan of their maybe entire body? Mm-hmm. And then now every person at a wedding can take photographs, and let's say the phones are somehow connected with like contacts in your phone. Maybe you have access to these 3D scans of these people.
Yeah.
And so maybe, you could say, well, no cell phone camera is ever going to be good enough to take photos in a dimly lit wedding hall or whatever. Sure. But what happens if they don't have to be good? What happens if the phone just barely needs to be good enough to like capture an idea of what's going on in the scene? That's Pye over there. That's his wife over there. Those are his kids right there. And then it uses supercomputers to build this image at 1 billion megapixels. Mm-hmm. Total perfection. It knows you're a little overweight right now. We're going to make him a little skinnier.
Thanks, buddy.
Your wife's got the pimple. We're just not going to put that in the photo, And I know this sounds like sci-fi. This sounds crazy. But, like, did you see the Mark Zuckerberg interview with where they're talking with AI goggles on, and the AI goggles are recording their faces and then converting that into these digital avatars, and it is so close to photorealistic.
I don't think we're far from that, like maybe 5-10 years away from that type of technology built into basically every mobile device. But it gets back to like what I hold on to, like this last 2 years was rough for me creatively because it was kind of like redefining why I was taking a photograph. Like why am I doing what I'm doing? And it was really difficult because I think for a long time, I kind of fell into the loop of like, I teach people how to take pretty pictures and I take pretty pictures, right? And you kind of get disconnected from what it is that we're actually doing. And in reality, finding that connection again was actually through AI, because what I'm actually doing is capturing real moments and real memories. And that's where I feel like there's always going to be value in real moments, real memories. And there's always going to be people like I know that a phone, in 5 years, your phone probably will be able to, like there's another case study of a company that basically built these fake sets, and they used AI to basically create the set with prompts. So they just had basically people standing in place, different things standing in place, and different objects and whatnot. And they just built the whole scene out of AI. And it looked incredible. It was this anime piece. But that kind of stuff is really cool. But when you start like saying, okay, if I'm, as a human, if I want you to photograph my wedding, I think the vast majority of us, not everybody, but a lot of us want realism. I want you to capture my wedding. I want you to capture my event through your artistic eye. I want you to make it look better, but I also want it to be real. It's the same reason that, see, if this argument that you're saying were to be true, like to hold up across the board, you would expect that over the past 10 years, every single wedding photograph has altered skies, altered this, because skies have been easy to replace for a while. Why aren't people just changing the skies on every single image? Why aren't they doing...
I think it just comes down to the amount of work.
I don't think so. I think it comes down to, I mean, that's part of it. But I think also, like for me intrinsically, if I know that you've captured me through this augmented reality thing, it doesn't have that much meaning to me. All right. And my proof, by the way.
Okay.
When in my first marriage, we went to China to get photos. And this is the exact experience that they created out there 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were standing on green screen sets, and they were replacing everything, and they were putting bubbles in, and we were standing in front of a castle. This existed. They exist. This existed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I hated every single one of those photographs.
Sure. So, it doesn't feel real at all. It's just so sterile. Sure.
But there is a market for it. I will give you that, because there's a lot of Chinese people in China that very much wanted that. Maybe because if your day-to-day existence in a city is just constantly surrounded by concrete and nonstop people everywhere, maybe what you want from your photographs is escapism, right? Maybe what you want from that experience is something that's just so completely different. But if your reality is something that you appreciate, then what you probably want in a photograph is something that helps you remember that.
I see what you're saying, but again, I think I'm doing a poor job of explaining what the future could be. I'm making it seem like I'm going to, hold up my camera and then create this like 100% fake digital representation of what's
10% better than what it is.
Maybe, but so, for example, one new feature that recently came out that all the professional photographers joked at, goofed on, was the what's it called? The fake blur on the iPhone, the fake bokeh. What's that called?
Just the
portrait mode.
Portrait mode.
Portrait mode. Okay.
Which is now in Lightroom, basically. Adobe's brought it into Lightroom.
All right. So it comes out that the iPhone can now recreate shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
All professional photographers, it's bullshit, it's going to be fake, it doesn't look real, nah, you got to have a pro camera do that, blah, blah, blah. Then it comes out, and everybody's like, ooh, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So then, I would imagine, like me, you just start using it all the time. And you're like, well, it's pretty convenient, it's in my pocket all the time. Yeah, I've got all the professional gear in the world, but I'm going to the park with my family today. I don't want to bring that. My phone, the photos look awesome. So then Apple comes out with the new feature, which is portrait mode after the fact. It just came out on the new phone. So now you don't have to take the photograph in portrait mode anymore. Yeah, you can just add shallow depth of field. It basically, each time you take a photo, it's creating a depth map of the shot, and it gives you the option later on to create a shallow depth of field. Is there a single person on Earth who is offended by that and goes, that's fake, you're not, I don't really know? No, they just want the image to look good, right? There are other phones. I don't know that Apple's really, Apple is definitely like finding faces, exposing properly for the face, maybe brightening faces, doing stuff like that, right? There's other phones out there that are going a step further than that, finding teeth, whitening them, finding blemishes, just automatically, not telling you that it's doing any of this.
Yeah, a lot of social media stuff does this too.
Okay, it's just doing it automatically. And I don't think the average person is looking at that going, I don't like this idea. They just look at the finished image and they go, that's me.
True.
That looks better than I thought it would. Okay, I'm happy with this. I'm posting it, right? So,
but that's that 5%, 10% improvement that we're talking about. Is like they're look like those small things are acceptable to an extent because we don't necessarily notice it.
So the argument is, we can all admit cell phones are getting closer and closer every year to professional cameras, right? And wouldn't you also argue that professional cameras really aren't getting that much better anymore? Like, I used to be so pumped every time Nikon would release a new camera. When I was a Nikon shooter 15 years ago, it was like, oh my gosh, it was 6 megapixels. Now it's 12. What? 100% improvement? That's crazy. Autofocus. It actually works now. Like 50% of your images used to be blurry. Now only 25% of your images. Well, I got to buy this.
Yeah.
Now these new cameras come out and it's like, I don't even know what the new features are. It's like there's more pixels on the LCD display on the back. And you're like, all right, that's a little
slightly better dynamic range. Little more frame rate.
A half stop better dynamic range. And I'm like, all right, Patrick still shoots on the Nikon D850. Like, how old is that camera? No matter what Nikon comes out with, new mirrorless camera, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I don't care.
One of my biggest disappointments in the camera industry is the failure to recognize the software component of the camera. They have not invested in the software components of their camera like the phone industry. Because the phone industry had no other choice, though. The phone industry recognized that, like, if you're creating mobile devices, you have limitations as far as what your lens can do. You have limitations as far as the sensor. So everything else has to be software based.
Right. And that's my point.
It never made sense why they didn't invest that way.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing is, like, professional photographers, me included, fight against all the automation stuff. Yeah. We worked so hard to learn how to shoot in manual and like have a vision for the shot and make it look good the way that we want it to look. And so this idea that a camera can do a better job, or an AI prompt can do a better job than me, or Photoshop can make my image look better than I can in camera, all of these things are offensive to me. I don't want to admit that's true. But then I used the new iPhone portrait feature, and I'm like, it looks pretty freaking awesome, like right out of my phone. So I'm not going to say it's better results than I can get with my Pro camera, but it's a heck of a lot easier and faster, and it's 90% the same, you know? Yeah. And so if we keep going in this direction, there's already AI. I don't exactly know even what AI means and like where that line is between like computer program, software, and then AI. Like where does that cross over? I don't exactly know. But as cell phones get better and better and better, and our Pro cameras literally don't do anything different, they don't add any software or AI component whatsoever. They're so slow to like connect to a computer and transfer files over, whereas my phone is connected to the internet at all times. I can wirelessly airdrop something to you or my laptop, and it's just so much easier. It's not going to be that much longer until it's just, there's not that much of a reason to have the Pro stuff anymore. And
well, I agree with that. Like, I agree with there's not going to be much reason to have the Pro stuff anymore, especially if it doesn't keep up, basically. But what I think the only piece that you and I disagree on, I think, is what part of the photographic experience, especially if you're a professional, what part of the photographic experience remains at least somewhat safe and intact, and what part is up on the chopping block? I don't know if we agree on that piece of it, but
I don't know that I even know, you know.
5 years, I do completely. I could photograph a wedding with my phone right now.
Sure.
And I think I can do a pretty good job of it for the most part. Like, you know, there's certain situations, certain scenes that would be problematic, but for the most part, I think I could do a pretty dang good job with that. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, I completely agree from the standpoint of like technology-wise, I don't think there will be a need for professional cameras unless they can do more. If you could build the phone software into a DSLR, beautiful. Then there's absolutely a reason for that. But as it stands, if cameras continue the way they're going, phones continue the way they're going, then I do see those two things basically merging maybe 5 or 10 years down the road. But what I see as safe in terms of, if you're a professional and you're concerned about AI, what I consider safe is the experiential aspect of what we do. If we boil it down to like, it's redefining the role of a photographer, the role of a creative. It was never to create the final image. We all are fixated on the fact that the photograph is the actual product that we're creating, and it's not. The actual product that we're creating is the emotional experience behind that photograph. A photograph is simply an anchor point, an emotional anchor back to an experience that we had. And if that experience was positive, then we love that photograph. If that experience was negative, then we hate the photograph. Going back to kind of when you see a Peter Lick or when you see one of those spots that you've seen, you don't necessarily like it or want that photograph because it reminds you of like something that's not that great of an experience. But if as a photographer, your focus is on the experiential side, meaning like, for example, on the wedding side, right? It's so much beyond just the photograph. It's how you interacted with them. It's what they were feeling in the moment. Did you make them feel confident? Are they having a good time? Is it an image that they feel is authentic to them? Is it a moment that was fleeting, that they really loved and they wanted to have captured? Those are the pieces that I think stay, at least for a substantial amount of time. Those are the pieces that are of value. On the portrait side, an example, we just started up a new portrait business because Justin and Chris and my kids, they're all in youth sports. Nobody's really currently creating like editorial quality youth sports images. So we created a business called Kinetic Capture. And the whole goal, the concept is bring these kids in and show them, not through AI, not through anything that's not real, but they stand there right in front of the camera. They see this image captured of them that looks incredible, and they see it blown up right there on display. And you see their faces light up. You see their confidence. You see the sense of empowerment that they get. Oh my gosh, that's me. That's what I look like when I do a crossover. That to me is the piece of photography that doesn't go anywhere. It's the emotional experience attached to it. And if that's what you're delivering, I feel like you're going to be in a relatively safe space. But if you're just capturing nice headshots, you're in trouble. Because right now already, and we predicted this over a year ago, we were like, if you're just capturing a headshot of somebody And the goal of the headshot, like for a real estate agent, what is the goal of their headshot? The goal of a real estate agent is save time, save money, get the best possible headshot. They don't care about the emotional attachment to it. It's a commodity. They just want something to show off, right? And now you have these AI-based headshot apps. You have AI-based headshot photographers. Give me an image of you, Lee. I'll generate 20 different headshots. You don't have to leave your home.
Exactly.
That's, to me, those are the areas that are in trouble. Commoditized areas of photography or any creative endeavor are in trouble.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to argue with you a little bit here. My specialty.
That is your specialty.
I feel like you're trying to make the argument that the act of taking the photos, you're selling like the experience of having your photo taken.
Sure.
I would argue that let's say weddings, for example, because that's something that we're both very familiar with. Having a stranger at your wedding telling you to pose in weird ways and stuff is the opposite of a positive, memorable experience.
Of course, if you have that kind of if that's the connection that you have with your photographer, I would agree. Like a stranger.
Dude, you're not best friends with your clients, man. Like, no, I know. Met them a few times before.
But there is still, when you find a wedding photographer, when you find someone that you're typically looking for someone that you have some sort of connection with, you're looking for someone you appreciate the work that they do, you appreciate, and then you get to meet them and you get to appreciate the experience.
Sure.
And to counter that point, I actually do become friends with a lot of my clients.
Sure. But my argument is, let's just say, for argument's sake, I know we're a long ways away from this, but let's just say you could have, let's say you're getting married tomorrow, right? And all of your friends are wedding photographers, but let's pretend you can't use any of them.
Sure.
And let's say I give you two options. You can hire a professional photographer whom you're not familiar with, and they do great work, or you can get the exact same quality photos from your friends and family members who are able to somehow, because we're in the future and this hypothetical, they're able to get the exact same photos on their cell phones. What person in a million years would choose to pay a stranger when they can be surrounded by the people they care about most in the most genuine and comfortable situations?
True.
Getting the exact same photographs, and I believe one day the photographs will be better.
If that's what you're promising, then yes, you'd be hard pressed to be a professional at that point. But that's the assumption there is that not only is the technology there, but somehow they know how to capture you in the right poses. Somehow they know how to frame you against the right background. Somehow they know how to add artistic elements to it. Like you're filling in a lot of gaps.
I am. My hypothetical is a little absurd to an extent. However,
but I do think I think for 80 to 90% of people, what I just mentioned as far as good backgrounds, posing, that kind of stuff, for 80% of people, that won't matter. For 80% of people, because that was never necessarily like our audience to begin with, right? If we were to look at like the photographer's audience can't be people that commoditize the photograph. If an image by you is as good as an image by someone else, and I believe that the vast majority of people feel this way, that like, you know, a car is a car is a car. If it gets me from point A to point B reliably, it's good enough.
Yeah.
I think for 80% of the market, what you just described is going to happen within 5 to 10 years, and it'll be enough.
But I guess I'm also throwing in the idea right now. For example, you're going to say, well, the professional photographer is going to get more interesting artistic framing. The better photographer is going to have better
I'm
lighting.
that 80% don't care.
Sure. But let's say that we're talking about the 20% who do care. What happens when cell phones and artificial intelligence allow you, I mean, we're already at the point where we can change the focus after the fact. What happens when we can change the lighting after the fact, right?
That's doable right now too. Not on a practical level, but it's doable.
Right. Soon, that's going to be like no problem at all. Like even in this room right here, we're in my hotel room, I worked for quite a while to get this horrible set looking the way that it does right now. We've got a light above your head right now that I had to turn off because if that was firing right down, it would be creating these bags under your eyes and everything like that. But what if none of that mattered anymore for photo or video? And we could just sit down anywhere, and although we have a bed right there that was in my shot, and that's why I have to frame us up weird like this, just move that, and AI, say add Pye's legs down where this bed is, whatever, and it just does a perfectly flawless job of redrawing your legs that are covered up by that bed.
Yeah.
At that point, why do you need me to sit here for an hour and move lamps around and bounce that light off that wall over there and cut this light off and slide the bed out of the way and everything? It's just, I know we're not there yet, and maybe we're 30 years away from that. Maybe it won't even happen in my lifetime. I don't know, but it certainly feels like we're getting there real quick.
It feels like we're 5 to 10 years away from all that. I mean, the argument then becomes simply, you wouldn't need you to do what you did, but the question to me would be, what would your role shift to? Because if you were in this case, you're like the lighting person, right? The gaffer that goes and like sets this. Maybe you don't need a gaffer anymore. But what you might need is someone that can generate, well, you're going to have people that can generate content and scripts and all, again, use AI, but you're going to have people that need to be behind the camera to direct. You're going to have different parts of that experience, but your work will most definitely shift away from the technical components of it, which it always has. It always has shifted. Everything since the beginning has always started as something technical and then shifted slowly away from being technical to something being purely creative. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the exact same as this. Why would you still be needed? Because you're offering something creative that is not technical, that is beyond what an AI could do. It's something part of the human experience. And I do think that eventually that is something that AI will do as well, but I think that's 50 to 100 years away maybe. But you're right that like, if a photographer is basing, and I can think of a million of these, photographers who think their work is meaningful because of how difficult it was to create it.
Right. Yeah.
They're in trouble.
Well, and that is such a natural human, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but that's not just a problem with photographers. That's a problem with everyone, especially creative people who you're so blinded by all of the technical stuff that went into creating whatever it is you create. But the average person doesn't and can't know any of those details.
Absolutely.
All they can see is the finished product.
Absolutely.
I've told this story before, but there was this girl I met. She worked at a camera store, and she was the only one there who had a degree in photography. I have a very low opinion of higher education in creative fields. She was the only, she was like the only person I had ever met at the time that had a degree in photography. Yeah. Maybe it was even a master's degree or something. And she showed me her final like Omega project. And it was literally photographs of stuffed animals on a table. And it looked like a snapshot. I mean, it was literally worse than you would take. If I was like, hey, take a picture of the stuffed animal on that table with your phone. Literally worse than that. And she showed it to me, beaming with pride. And I'm like, what is this? And then she starts explaining how it was taken with a large format camera with bellows. And I had to use this special type of lighting. Yeah. And the film was this very expensive 8x10 black and white film. And blah, 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 blah. And she goes into this whole thing about why this is of value. Mm-hmm. But from my perspective, I'm like holding back the cringe. Like, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen. But she couldn't separate the two. And I suffer from this as well. And in our competitions, we're blinded by our own work, right? In many cases, when we do these photo competitions, I just lost another photo competition in Patrick. I'm looking at his photo and I'm like, I know this is bad. And then I'm looking at mine and I'm like, I'm not saying it's amazing, but it's definitely better than yours. Because I can tell you why yours is bad. but here's all the reasons I can tell you why mine is good. And here's my thought process of why I did it this way. And here's why I moved the light over there. And like, this is why, as I was taking this photograph, I had a reason to make it look like this.
Yeah.
The thing is, I feel like all creative people need these wake-up calls.
Yeah.
And most people can keep themselves in the dark. If you don't do something professionally, or even if you do, you can make some argument that like the industry has changed, or like they don't know what good art is, or that person's a sellout and the only reason why they're able to sell what it is they do and I can't is because they know somebody in the industry or their dad's rich or whatever it might be. You know, come up with all these excuses, but nobody ever wants to admit my work's just not that good. You know, it's just not that good. And so,
well, we all have that emotional attachment to the things that you invest your time in too.
Yeah.
So that's happening too.
But I think it's important to circle all this back to AI. I think it's important that if AI can create a better photograph than you, you have to be willing to admit it.
Sure.
Because if you don't, you're not going to pivot to move to that new industry that's still photography or image creation related, but it's not the exact same as what we were doing last year. And I think the people who are just, you know, putting their fingers in their ears going, we've heard it all before. There's always going to be photographers. We don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all photographers are going to go out of business, but I am saying if you do not work with this, if you don't switch from film to digital, if you don't switch from letting somebody else, you know, who's printing your photos do all the editing and you don't learn Photoshop, I feel like you're going to lose. And I feel like if you don't jump on this AI bandwagon, you will lose as well.
I would generally agree with that, with caveats to like what spaces you're in and how you're using it and whatnot. But like one of the big points I think that you made that you kind of glossed over is that AI is going to raise like kind of the tide in the harbor, right? All boats are going to get lifted up. And they have to be, because if AI is doing things that are this good, if the images that you're posting, they have to be able to compete with that. There's a certain like right now, the value of a photograph when you browse online is almost zero. And they're incredible images, right? So the value of this snapshot, the value of like that stuffed animal on the table, it goes down even further, because if everybody's able to generate something good to great, then as a professional, what you have to be able to generate is something really fantastic. It's something that's on par, if not above that.
And that's getting to be almost impossible.
I think it's almost impossible if you're only looking at it from the aesthetic quality of the image. I think it's entirely possible if you're looking at it from the overall story and messaging of an image. If you're looking at it from the experiential aspect, if it goes beyond just the aesthetic quality.
But that's only from the customer's perspective. If you are just posting photographs, like at this very moment, if you post a wedding photograph online, 100% of people are going to think that's a real photograph, in the sense of like, those are real people. That's a real place. Maybe the sky's replaced.
Sure.
Maybe they've done some blemish removal, but that's real.
Yeah.
If you post a badass picture of like, you know, like a cosplay where somebody's like dressed up like a superhero or what, and it looks flawless, I just immediately think that's not real.
Yeah.
That's AI.
My mind goes to that place too, a lot. That's where I think in these fine art spaces, in these spaces of just like where the photograph is just an illustration of creativity, I do agree 1000% that AI has to become part of your workflow. It has to become part of the toolkit that you're using, because again, if you're creating landscapes, if you're just creating things that are pretty to look at, you better be using the best tools, and that's going to be one of those tools. But that comes down to defining what it is that you really do. Are you a digital artist? If you're a digital artist, the photograph, the camera, a paintbrush, and AI, those have to go hand in hand. If you are a photographer who is focused on experiential, like if you're focused on memories, then not so much so. Then it becomes more about Like, what can I create that's real, that people can attach to, that has an emotional. But I think those genres of photography are going to be dwindling. I think weddings are going to stick around. Certain types of portrait photography are going to stick around. Certain types of family photography are going to stick around. Because I don't know that, like me, myself, we're a family of 6. I don't want an AI generated photograph of my kids. I want something that's real. Even if they're, grabbing stuff and throwing it at each other during the photo shoot, I want that.
I understand, but again, when you take a portrait mode photo on your phone, you still consider that's real, even though it's not real.
Yeah, there's the degrees, right? Because
right.
We can go back and say, well, once you start lighting something, then it's not really. There's still manipulation there.
Sure.
Unless you're framing it, you're framed out the count, like the sofa or the bed. There's manipulation there too, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of an argument to like what constitutes like real versus not real, like what it is.
That's the thing, and that's why everybody just jumps to this argument of photographers aren't going anywhere. People want photographs of real places and real people.
That I definitely disagree with.
Sure, like of course we all want that. I'm saying you will be able to do that with a phone better than what we can currently do with our professional cameras. Now, maybe there's going to be a huge pivot, and in a few years, somehow our professional cameras are also going to become these little AI supercomputers, and you can upload apps to them that can do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like so much of what media is consumed on now is just like a little cell phone screen. So this idea that we need, 4K or 8K cameras, it's not that, like, is that what it's all going to come down to? Is just more resolution? That's the only difference in a pro camera versus like a cell phone, is just going to be more resolution? Like that seems dumb, So it's hard for me to imagine that these pro cameras are ever going to be able to connect to the internet and to apps like a cell phone will, because these app developers know if I create an iPhone app, I'm going to have like X million customers or whatever. Yeah. But if I work my ass off and I create a Sony A7S III app, how many people are even going to pay for that?
True.
It's like such a small audience and compared to every single person who has a smartphone in their pocket.
Well, that side of it, I agree with you completely on. Like, I don't, cameras are not keeping up in a way that keeps them relevant in 5 to 10 years. I don't see them, professional cameras, that is. But there very well likely could be, maybe Canon, Nikon, and Sony, maybe those ships are too big to really be steered that nimbly when this type of technology is coming out. But I do see a third party coming along and saying, you know what? We don't have any of that existing infrastructure. We don't have to worry about manufacturing. We don't have to do any of that. We've never been building traditional lenses for 30 years. We don't have billions of dollars invested in these things. So why don't we now just take the mirrorless tech or whatever is the newest at the time and build it around a phone? Like, I'm kind of wondering why nobody's done that yet. Why hasn't Apple basically just come out with an iPhone with interchangeable lenses, a bigger sensor, and that is now the professional camera? That's where I see the professional camera going, is to something of that. And at this point, I don't think it's going to be one of the major manufacturers doing it, because I think those ships are too big and too difficult to steer in that direction.
The problem with your theory is the lens situation. The amount of money and development that goes into making an entire lens line.
They wouldn't have to, because they just open it up to the PL mount system, right? They can open it up to third-party manufacturers. It can be third-party everything. Someone just needs to have the platform.
Well, I've heard just such good things about Blackmagic cameras, and they just have the Blackmagic Cinema camera. They just have like the big touch screen on the back. Yeah. And I've talked to people and they're like, it's so easy. It just you go, I've owned Sony cameras for years now, and still going in the menu and trying to find, like, one of my cameras, maybe you could tell me, one of my cameras, every time I turn it off and turn it back on, it goes to manual focus. It like reverts back to manual focus. I have tried for 6 months to find where in the menu I have it set to revert back to manual focus every
That's
time.
Sony camera?
Yes, I think it's this one. And I can't find it. And then, I'll like start Google searching it and then something will come up and I'll like lose track. And then a month later, I'll pick up this camera and I'm like, why is it on manual focus again? And every time I've used like Blackmagic or just one of these other cameras that, iPhone camera, whatever, where everything is right there on the touch screen and you can just find exactly what you want right there. I'm not sure what the answer is, but yeah, it would be, I mean, in a way, Red kind of did this years ago.
A bit. I think you need a company that's going to, the reason why, like, to me, the iPhone experience is so incredible is because you've got engineers working hand in hand with people that, like, on the same team that are not photographers and not engineers. They're just users. They just want to create a good experience.
Right.
With Sony, I feel like that entire menu system was designed by an engineer and nobody else looked at it. Like, not a single person on the team was like, hey, is it a good idea to have like 16 pages within each of these tabs and then to have like 670 different options that are available?
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like they had like a user experience person that was involved with that. And my wife is a UX designer. If you handed her a Sony, she would just throw it at the wall. Like that would be, its greatest value would be as to hold her paper down. But anyway, I agree with you completely on that. And we've kind of talked a lot on this subject. I am excited for certain things. Like, AI has the ability from the professional photographer's workflow right now to handle your editing. We have a product on that, right? It eliminates all of that. It has the ability to allow us to focus more on what we do. Like, we use ChatGPT, we use all these different pieces to take up the rote pieces of those jobs so we can focus more on the creativity. Those are the pieces that I'm really excited about. I think the best positioning for a photographer is to redefine who they are and what they are. And it needs to leave, it can't be associated to this image is valuable because it was hard. That can't be what you're doing anymore. It can't be creating a photograph. It has to be, this image is meaningful, maybe not to everybody, but to the specific people that I'm selling it to, because it's attached to this memory, because it's attached to this. But it's redefining what it is and creating an experience around what they do. And that's what they're marketing. That's what they're selling. And if you're doing that, I feel like you're in a relatively safe space, like, for the most part.
I think you should just give up. So there's no hope.
And that is the other side of it.
No, I just be prepared to change. It's uncomfortable for all of us, especially as we get older.
For sure.
And we try to do like just trying to use Midjourney and being like, why do I have to have a Discord account? And why am I writing in this weird chat thing? And why don't they just have some app that does that? And I start getting frustrated and I'm like, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. Why don't these kids make it like that? But I think if you want to be successful, you got to get on this train because nobody's stopping it.
For sure. There is no stopping it. That's 1000% for sure. But, well, we're going to close this out. In the meantime, though, we will also link up that tutorial that you guys just put out with Elia. We did a review on it. It's absolutely fantastic. All your guys' stuff is fantastic. But we'll link up that tutorial as well as the Fstoppers store and anything else that we talked about. I'll let Viet kind of drop it in. So that's it for us.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all next time.